Right. Well, the bad thing about going last at a meeting like this is that, of course, everything vaguely interesting that I had to say has already been said. Let's just hope that repetition really is the key to learning. So, others on the panel have covered China's achievements in renewable energy and so on. My focus today is going to be what China's developments on renewable energy and in other aspects of managing climate change and potential ecological catastrophe mean for the rest of the world, and especially for the global south. And to give you a too long didn't listen, in a sentence, China's green revolution isn't just benefiting China, it's currently the single most important factor in determining whether humanity has any chance of avoiding climate breakdown. The first aspect of this that I want to touch on is the cost revolution, because China's innovation, its investment, its unbelievable economies of scale have transformed the economics of renewable energy globally. According to the International Energy Association, China's huge investment has contributed to a cost decline of more than 80%, helping solar photovoltaic to become the most affordable generation technology in many parts of the world. So, in most parts of the world, if you're installing a power station, it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be more cost effective to do it on the basis of solar or wind energy rather than fossil fuel. So, this is something completely new, completely without precedent. China now produces at least 80% of the world's solar panels, 60% of the world's electric vehicles, 60% of the world's wind turbines, 80% of every stage of the photovoltaic supply chain. Um, Adam Tooze, a well-known economist, has said that there is one country that dominates the entire dynamic of the energy transition globally, and that is China. And similarly, David Wallace Wells, who writes for the New York Times, mainly on environmental issues, says that if you take China out of the global renewable rollout, the global story looks much less optimistic. And, it just goes to highlight the utter stupidity of the Trump and Biden administrations with their tariffs and their sanctions on Chinese solar, on Chinese electric vehicles, on Chinese batteries. China's building a decarbonization pathway for the world, and Washington is trying to block it. Another aspect of the topic I wanted to cover is the Green Belt and Road Initiative. Around 600 million people in Africa currently lack reliable access to electricity as a result of colonial underdevelopment. Africa is right now in the middle of a solar and wind revolution thanks to predominantly Chinese solar panels and Chinese built power plants. Chad, for example, currently has an electrification rate of 6.4%, but it's planning to reach 53% by 2030, so within the next few years, using Chinese solar. Uh, Major renewable plants have been built in South Africa, in Zambia, in Algeria, in Namibia, in Sierra Leone, and elsewhere using Chinese technology, Chinese financing, Chinese investment. And Xi Jinping made a pledge in 2021 at the United Nations General Assembly that no new overseas coal-fired plants would be built under the Belt and Road Initiative. And China has held true to that over the past 5 years. So the Belt and Road Initiative has pivoted decisively green. In Latin America, Chinese clean tech investment is growing very rapidly. So this is, in concrete material terms, what South-South cooperation looks like. Developing countries leapfrogging fossil fuel development and going straight to renewables on terms that they control and that they can actually afford. And I just want to say something about the example of Cuba and China, which has been mentioned earlier. Cuba, as people will know, is under existential pressure at the moment. The Trump administration's cruel and utterly illegal energy blockade is causing blackouts of up to 20 hours a day in some region. Trump has openly stated that his goal is to bring down the Cuban government by the end of this year. The eternally idiotic South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, immediately after the strikes on Iran in late February, said, Cuba's next. And yet, in the middle of this, Cuba has managed to triple its solar power share from under 6% to over 20% in just 12 months, connecting 49 new solar parks and adding more than 1,000 megawatts of capacity, all with Chinese equipment, all with Chinese financing. China's committed to bringing 92 solar parks online by 2028 with a combined capacity of 2,000 megawatts, more or less matching Cuba's entire current fossil fuel generation capacity. And more than half of this is already online. The Ember Energy analyst Dave Jones says Cuba is perhaps in the middle of one of the most rapid solar revolutions anywhere in the world ever. And on top of that, China's donated 70 tons of power generator parts to Cuba, 10,000 photovoltaic systems for isolated homes, maternity wards, and clinics, along with an emergency aid package that includes 60,000 tons of donated rice. So the political point here is that this is socialist internationalism in a very concrete form. China's helping to keep the lights on in Cuba, quite literally in the teeth of a US blockade. And that all reinforces Xi Jinping's recent comment that China-Cuban relations are an exemplary case of solidarity and cooperation between socialist countries. So contrast what China's doing in relation to climate change and environmental issues with the United States. In Trump's first week, he pulled out of the Paris Agreement again. He declared that climate change is the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world. He called the renewable transition a hoax to support Chinese exports. The US military is the world's single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases. If the US military were a country, it would rank 47th globally. So that's in the top quarter of countries for its greenhouse gas emissions. And this same administration that's choking Cuba of oil is bombing oil depots in Iran, propping up a fossil fuel order, expanding its exports of hydraulically fractured gas, and it's trying to sanction Chinese clean tech out of existence. So you've got two opposing logics on display. One country, China, is using its productive capacity to install solar across the global south, replace coal, drive down costs, and bring modern energy to hundreds of millions of people. The other is bombing oil-producing countries, sanctioning solar panels, threatening tariffs on anyone who supplies Cuba with oil, and dismantling its own clean energy programs. So, I think you can say that Rosa Luxemburg's classic formulation of socialism or barbarism has acquired an ecological dimension. On a planetary scale, the choice is now green socialism or barbarism and climate breakdown. Green socialism is what China is materially doing, subordinating capital to social and ecological objectives, planning at scale, cooperating across borders to electrify the global south. Barbarism means what the US is doing, defending the fossil fuel order at gunpoint and denying the global south the right to develop. So, concluding, Mao Zedong said in 1956 that by the beginning of the 21st century, China should have made a greater contribution to humanity. And I would argue that that contribution is arriving in the form of cheap solar, electrified villages, Cuban power stations, and a viable global pathway away from fossil fuels. Our job in the West is to defend that contribution against the new Cold War and to argue for the broadest possible cooperation with China as the basis for any serious response to this global crisis. Thank you.